Good morning. Today is Kaf Vav Tammuz, the 15th of July. And we are continuing with our mimer from Reb Hillel about the exile and what it really means. And we're on page Vav. And we talked about Eov last time. And then, because the whole premise here is that the way that you act below, that's how it reflects how things are above, meaning they answer to you. There's a connection between the two. They reflect one another. Except that above it's the source, and below it's the result, one would say, or just a mirror of it.
Okay, that's not a new English.
No. ולכן אמר הבעל שם טוב, that's why the בעל שם טוב, על פסוק השם צילך כמו הצל כידוע. השם צילך על יד ימיניך. That God is like your shadow on your right hand. But what does that mean? That God is the source. It's like the sun. And you hold up your hand, and you see the shadow below. So you're like moving your hand, and that tells you, as it were,
The sun is moving.
no, the sun's your hand. The only thing you see moving is your hand, and you see the shadow moving. And from the shadow, you can tell what the sun is like, because really, what is happening? You're choosing out of the plethora, the myriad options in the sun. You're choosing the one that you want to reflect. Okay, that's the idea that you're moving your hand.
Where are you exactly?
Page Vav, here.
Where? You put that chance in?
נמצא לפי זה, could you put it down and then I'll show you. נמצא לפי זה. נוכל לידע משורת הדין למטה את ההנהגה מלמעלה. By looking at the way that justice is administered below, we can understand what is going on above, what the order of things is above.
Your ways are not our ways, and our ways are not your ways. But this book is completely different from us.
Right, that's another side.
So maybe it's got nothing to do with what you know.
That's another side, 100%. כי לא מחשבותיי מחשבותיכם. That your reason, so we have to bring the two famous stories about the cats and the cows. The cows is the original Chasidut tale. The cat is the one, sorry, no pun intended, is the one that either somebody in Vienna invented or it's real. I don't know. It could be that they just happen to be the same thing, but the point is they give across the same story. The story is like this, that there was Reb Zusha used to say there was this cow that the thing it loved the most, it was a very nice cow, very good, very well behaved, but the thing it loved the most was that they would bring it the wash water from all the plates that were cleaned Motzei Shabbos. Right back then they didn't have sewage. They used to keep the water. Used to water the garden with it or whatever. You didn't waste water. So they would clean all the dishes and it would have all the tastes of Shabbos in it because of all the food. There's nothing disgusting about it. It's just food. It's just the remainders.
It's the same as the mon.
Anyway, so they used to bring her a pail of this water, Motzei Shabbos, to drink. And the cow was in seventh heaven because it tasted all the taste of Shabbos. It was wonderful for it. Every Motzei Shabbos, somebody would bring out and put it in its trough, and it would love it. And then one Motzei Shabbos, they didn't bring it out. And the cow's waiting and mooing, and nothing comes out. The next morning they come out, the family comes out, and they bring it regular water. And it drinks from it, hoping maybe that, and then it concludes that people are very nice, they're very good, but last night they couldn't help themselves, and they drank it themselves because it's so delicious. So that's what it means, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. We're like cows trying to figure out a human being. The story in Vienna is that Viktor Frankl used to take out all the sheiraim, all the leftovers from food in a separate bag to the garbage. And so he'd take a big bag of garbage and had all the other garbage, and he'd have the leftover food. And the regular garbage he'd put in the garbage bin, and the leftover food he'd distribute to the cats.
Okay.
Yeah, there were cats there, I guess, apparently. Stray cats. So they loved him, and every time he'd come out with the garbage, they'd follow him until he opened the leftover bag. And then one day he had to rush to the train station to catch a train somewhere, and he didn't have time to play the whole game. So he put everything in the same bag and threw it all into the garbage bin. The cats concluded that today the man's a very nice man, but today he couldn't resist it, and he ate all the good food himself. So that's what it means that my thoughts are not your thoughts. You can't figure out Hashem's thoughts. That's a different level. But in terms of if you would look at this situation properly, or any situation in your life, you would understand that Hashem wants you to understand something. I don't want the cats to understand anything. I'm not there for them to understand. But when you do want people to understand, like the Zohar says, that the whole world is a stage, le'itchaza, right? Which literally means it's a stage. What's it staging? Le'itchaza.
It's the copy, no?
No, le'itchaza is to present, to show. All the world's a stage. What's it a stage for? So there are different things, but the main thing is that you will learn judgment, din. Judgment means that when you act this way, there is this result. Meaning you're supposed to learn cause and effect. And so, when you act in a certain way, they show you from Shemayim that this is how you've been acting. But don't make the mistake of thinking that you're the origin. You're not the origin. You're just the choosing which one of the many possible realities you will bring upon yourself. Okay, this is a very important topic, but it's kind of it's a side topic here. But in any case, the conclusion is but if we look at how justice is administered below by Hashem, then we can understand how it's functioning above. Well, what's going on? ולמטה אנו רואים שסדרו של מידת הדין בתחילה הוא בתוקף, ועל ידי ששופך חמתו בדיבור או בפעולה בתוכה מגולה, על ידי זה נחלש מידת הכעס. When we get angry, when justice is administered, you send someone to jail. How does it work? When you start, we see from human conduct, when you start, you have the full strength of justice. You give the person everything. And then slowly, as time goes on, you lighten up. The justice is weaker and weaker. So, for instance, even if I'm angry at my son for something, so in a few first moments I'm very angry, then slowly my anger diminishes. If you're not like that, there's something wrong with you. But most people, 99% of people, that's the way they are. Okay? From that you learn that that's how God is also. Because we see that is human nature. Again, we didn't make it that way. We didn't make God that way. He's very clear about that. This is not Feuerbach. Okay? You didn't read Feuerbach. You should read him. It's very interesting. So he imagines that we imagine what God is like given how we are. Okay? The way that we are, we imagine everything is like that. Which is a fair assessment of the situation. Except in Yiddishkeit we believe otherwise. We believe that Hashem is the origin and we are the mirror. So the way that we act is a mirror of how Hashem is. And it's okay for us to make the projection of saying that if we're this way, Hashem is also this way. Otherwise, there would be no argument here. Otherwise, you could just say, and this is, by the way, what people feel. People feel that God is completely incomprehensible to the point of the absurd. Who created this? You know there was absurd, right? You know the theater of the absurd, which is a whole movement that came after World War II, which is that the world is absurd. We thought that there was some logic to the world, but now we see that all bets are off. So take that and magnify it 1,000 times to get what a Jew is after the Holocaust. What is he saying? As if this was the only Holocaust. There were many before it. But they were on different scales. So this one, he says, there's never been anything like this. What does God want from us? If we're paying the price for what happened 2,000 years ago when the temple was destroyed and we went out to exile, let's say it's not just that. Let's say there are even these theories, like Rav Kook has this theory, that, and a lot of people agree with him, that the second temple is an interim stage. It's not a real temple. Why? It was missing many things. It wasn't a full-fledged temple. It was meant to give us some strength on our journey. So really the exile started 2,700 years ago, or 2,600, whatever it is. So what do you expect? That as the exile moves along, the midat adin, the measure of judgment, gets weaker. How could he still be angry? What are you angry at? If you're still angry, you're absurd. I don't want to worship a God like that. And they're right. If that's what you imagine, so there's two options. One is, God is a man-made invention. It doesn't work that way. Human beings don't function this way. I can't serve something that is nothing like me. And so they gave up. Fine. Okay, they gave up. And then they created the state of Israel, which is basically, we gave up on you, God. And we're going to do everything the way we want to. Which is why it's so hard to change it now, back to being something that's observant, something that has any connection to Yiddishkeit. I don't want to get into the state of Israel. Right. It came as a result of everything, and the Holocaust was like a chotemet gumi. It was like a stempel. You're right. You're exactly right. Don't count on me. I'm not in the picture. So go build some democratic, whatever liberal thing you want to build. Not interested. That's the one option. The other option was what the Baal Shem Tov came to the conclusion of, which is a God who wants to teach us paradox. He wants to say what you said, that in the end, even though you may understand everything, I'm above that understanding. That's the other option. Reb Hillel now is going to give us a third option, which is 100 times better than both of them. Why? Because the Baal Shem Tov himself, as we'll see, the Reb Hillel looks from a perspective of at least 100 years at the Baal Shem Tov, and he says the Baal Shem Tov played a certain role in this process. And it's part of what it is. It's not the whole picture. If you take the Baal Shem Tov just by himself, and you understand that what he wanted to teach us was paradox, you won't get the full picture yet. Because the Baal Shem Tov is part of the bigger whole of what's going on. And he's going to explain it. That too. Which is paradoxical. Because somehow the world could be falling apart, and there's this paradox, which people felt very strongly in the Holocaust, for instance, that somehow I'm being saved. How does that even make any sense? How do you begin to justify that to yourself? People couldn't. They didn't know what to do with themselves. So some people said, it means Hashem really is giving me a special task. And they saw it as personal providence, and that's the Baal Shem Tov at play. But for a lot of people, this was disastrous, because they couldn't handle the fact that Hashem was saving just them and not everyone else. Especially since the only way to be saved was probably, by most people, I'm not saying there weren't exceptions, but by most people, the only way to survive the Holocaust was to be a terrible person. You had to steal, you had to lie, you had to maybe kill, you had to do all kinds of things. And you didn't just do this to the Germans. You had to do it to people you cared for. You, in any other circumstance, would not have done that to. And so this left a tremendous scar on people that survived. So there's all kinds of reactions to it. But the bottom line is, what he's saying here is, how can you possibly think other than that the judgment should get weaker and weaker as time goes on? That's how human beings are. And that's how Hashem is supposed to be. So what's going on here? Now we're going back to Egypt. The anger subsides over time. Until finally he stops all the punishment. That's why we say on Shabbos that a person who breaks vessels, it's a melacha. Why? Because what is he doing? He's fixing his countenance, his disposition, because he's getting over his anger, his temper. Another example that we see that it is like that above, that we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, which are like one day. The first day is called the Din Akashia. This is not even from Kabbalah. This is even from there's even a nigla like this. I don't remember where. But in any case, the first day is harsh judgment. The second day is lenient judgment. It's much weaker because the second day is weaker. ואם כן לפי זה לדעת מוישה שהגלות הוא מידת הדין, על איזה חטא כנ"ל? לכן שאל ידע שורש הדין מהו החטא, וזהו למה הראותה. So Moshe Rabbeinu first asked, what was the severe sin that was performed that they deserved this type of punishment. But the second thing is, then he asked about the administration of the judgment, of the justice here. Is there any kind of hidden sin that we can't see? Why? אבל על כל פנים היה צריך להיות סדר הגלות מתחילה, I'm skipping the parentheses, יותר ומתחלש לאט עד שמתעורר הגאולה. Because the order should have been that when I arrived, Moshe Rabbeinu, 210 years into the exile, it shouldn't be worse than it was at the beginning, it should be weaker. It should be less. ולמה היה בהיפוך זה? Why is it the opposite? שמתחילה כתוב ויחי יעקב בארץ מצרים 17 שנה. In the beginning, when they came down to Egypt, it says that Yaakov had his best 17 years in Egypt. So it was very beautiful then. ואמרו אז לא היו ימים טובים שהיה שרוי בטובה יותר מהם. ואחר כך נתעצם הגלות עד שמשנולדה מרים טעמו טעמר. Then, 86 years before Moshe Rabbeinu was coming to Egypt, when Miriam was born, she was named Miriam because the bitterness of the judgment began, the bitterness of the exile, the bitterness of the enslavement of Egypt. So it became even worse. That's Gimatria Elokim, 86. וכשנתעורר הגאולה על ידי משה הכביד הגלות בגשמיות ורוחניות כנ"ל. And then when Moshe finally comes, judgment. It's the name of judgment. So he says 86 years of harsher judgment. It's like Hashem revealed his harsher name at the end. Why at the end? And now when Moshe Rabbeinu comes at the very end, when they're supposed to be taken out of Egypt, what do you see? You see the worst possible situation. Now, both physically and spiritually, it's the worst. Physically, we said, because now he has this new thing that you can't get straw. I'm not giving out straw anymore. So one of your main ingredients for making the bricks you make every day is gone. The other one is that now nobody recognizes God. That now he's full chutzpah. There's no God. Not just no Havaya. Nothing. I'm not interested. You're making up this story called God in order to shirk your responsibilities. Right? So there was nothing like that. And notice again that the fact that there's kfira, the fact that there is heresy, the fact that there is heresy is a terrible word because it comes from Christianity. I don't want to use it. I don't know what the word in Hebrew is. Kfira means denial. The denial of the existence of a creator is unthinkable, and it destroys anybody who has half a mind. You know what? Even if you don't believe in it, for whatever reason, you're nuts. You still want society to function. Society doesn't function without this. It simply can't. You do believe, you pray fervently, don't pray fervently. It doesn't matter. How can you not believe in a higher power who is giving morality to the world and still expect the world to somehow function? It's not going to. You have the 20th century to show you. You get communism and Nazism. That's what you get. And everybody learned the lesson, supposedly. What?
Democracy.
Why? Democracy is not a terrible thing in and of itself. If it would be used for the right things, what's wrong with it?
What's wrong with democracy?
There's nothing wrong with it.
Because it's the rule of the majority. Even if
It's not the rule of the majority. Here, you're living today in the living proof that the majority does not make up the laws.
Exactly.
So it's not the rule of the majority. It's much more complex than that. What it's supposed to give is personal freedoms. That's not a bad thing in and of itself. In any case, V'chen gamata. Now he says, but it's a shame to continue today, so we'll continue this tomorrow. Because now he's going to say the same thing is happening now in 1840. It's the same thing is happening now in 2023.
Like today, what he said.
Exactly the same. There's no difference. It's just gotten worse. That's the whole point. That it's become unbearable. He didn't see the Holocaust. He didn't see the World War II. He didn't see World War I. What? No, he didn't need to. What do you mean? He saw what he had in his time. It was enough. It was enough to see that the Gullus was worse and worse. And more importantly, for him, the spiritual side of it getting worse was getting harsher and harsher.
One day you're going to